Hello YouTube, De-bodgery here. Welcome to EV Components Review. To do a proper investigation of these controllers, there's a lot of things to cover. They're going to be two-part videos. Each one's going to be about 20 minutes long, and that way it breaks it up into more palatable bites. Otherwise, I could go on for an hour in a single video. So 2 videos is going to be that way, and that way people who want to watch the whole thing, they can. People that want to skip around more and just catch the highlights, they can too. So yeah, the first video is going to be about the logic boards, and the second video is going to be about the power stages. And there's going to be some crossover between the two. There has to be. All right, so as you can see, this is the gold-colored Rush controller that was sent to me. Yep, there is 3 of these controllers from the individual, and he sent me 2 of them. And inside this shell, everything here was just absolutely black with soot. It was a giant mess inside here. In fact, like you look down inside this little corner, you can see where I still left a little bit of the thermal paste in there and some of the black as well. Yeah, you can see some of it down in there. Anyway, I put this in the kitchen sink, poured liquid dish soap in it, and used a toothbrush to scrub it out to this level. And of course, you know, all the thermal paste, I wiped that up with a paper towel first. But yeah, this was an absolute mess inside of just black soot everywhere. The only place it wasn't was basically this area where the bottommost power stage covered everything up. But yeah, like all down in these cracks and everything, that was all just absolutely full of soot, you know, all across these walls and everything. And like this area here, which is where all this catastrophe happened, this part, it's really stuck down. I scrubbed this extensively with the toothbrush and liquid dish soap and got it to this state. So anyway, yeah, I probably could scrape out it with a spooger, make it a little bit better, but then I'd lose the evidence of all of the shit show that happened over there. Yeah, you can see over here even where it happened. So yeah, there was some significant things going on in this area. That's an understatement if there was one. All right, so the first part is going to be logic boards, and the second part is going to be those, because there's a bunch of stuff to cover, including these caps. All right, so you will notice things are marked with 1s, and so is that, and this has got a 2 on it. This comes from the black Rush controller, whereas all this stuff came from here. So this is all the original parts from here, and this is the logic board from the black Rush controller. So anyway, the other Rush controller, when I pull all that stuff apart and clean that up, I will put 2s on that as well. There is a third Rush controller, which I do not have, did not get sent to me, which is fine. I am super glad to have the 2 that I have that are in the absolutely destroyed state that they are, because it shows you all the things that I've been saying forever about this stuff. Yeah, that third one, that's how it is that I have a third logic board, and that third logic board is in the black controller right now. So anyway, when I get to that one, I'll put a 3 on that logic board after I clean it up, so that we can keep track of which ones are which. All right, so anyway, I guess the first thing I want to show you is, since we're talking about logic boards, is the point of failure was identical. So all of this area of this logic board and all of that area of this logic board burnt to a crisp, because it's the same problem. I have talked about this already when I did the teardowns of my Rush controller, that this was going to be a problem, and well, I don't know about anybody else, but that looks like one hell of a problem. So let's talk about that a little bit. And yeah, what's really going on here? So I'll go back and forth between these 2 logic boards, because there's pieces of this that kind of make sense as we go along. So anyway, you can see copper here and just much torched circuit board. In the macro video, this will become more apparent, but all the copper here is literally melted away. And on this one, it's even more apparent that's the case. All of this is just melted away copper right here. And the only way that that happens is through really high temperatures. And the only way you're going to get that in a situation like this is with electrical arcing. You're not going to get that because somebody blasted it with a propane or butane torch or something. It's going to happen because of much higher temperatures, aka electrical arcing. And that is the failure point for these controllers. Now, why that happens, that one is kind of interesting. So first thing I want you to notice, I've got this little pile of destroyed capacitors over here. Those used to live right there. You know, and these ones over here, they look pretty much okay. In fact, I bet you those caps are in fact okay. And the same thing for these ones. These ones are probably all just A-okay. So why does this happen? And this is the root failure, all right? In my opinion, this is why these controllers blow up like they do. So I already know how or when this controller died. The person using it hit the throttle, was doing a speed run, let off, and then regen kicks in. You know, he hits the brake and regen kicks in. And when that happens, you get some pretty massive transient spikes. And those spikes can be really, really high. That's kind of the point of all these capacitors on here. They are multiples in parallel to soak all that stuff up to make sure that this kind of thing never happens. Make sure that like all your other electronics don't fry from those transients. That's kind of why they exist. That is why they exist. That's their main reason for existing, is soaking up noise, lots of noise, you know, giant spikes and things like that, that could possibly happen when you're running the controller. So, I have mentioned in my teardown videos about this Kapton tape on here, and this is KO Moto's Band-Aid for a problem that should never exist if they would have done it right to begin with. And as you can see on this one, there is no Kapton here. It's not over here, and yet, like on this one, you can still see little fragments of it there. By the way, to melt Kapton tape, you can solder on this stuff. I mean, the stuff will take some serious heat. You know, 600-700 degrees Fahrenheit. Kapton is really impressive plastic. And here it is literally gone. So the amount of heat that was right here was impressively hot. Really, really hot. And the only way you get that is from electrical arcing, period. Okay, so, yeah. This one, you don't see any of that. So this is a much earlier logic board than this one, and that's not really surprising. Their Band-Aid was to slather it down with some bodged together Kapton tape to try to solve a problem. So the real problem here is exactly the one that I said. The capacitors literally arc to all these bare traces, but it happens under very specific circumstances. So on these ones here, you know, there's no Kapton underneath them, but that little gap between there is just enough to keep the battery voltage that's on the caps from battery plus to battery minus from arcing between that little gap. It's just enough. The Kapton tape does add a little bit more protection for that, but it's still insufficient. Proof's right here. This is all completely destroyed. So clearly the Kapton tape didn't do a good enough job. You needed a much thicker piece of Kapton, i.e. a laser cut piece of Kapton that would, you know, really be thick to possibly arrest this problem, and then it still wouldn't solve the root cause. And the root cause is, here's battery plus, all across the top of here you have a stud, and then this part out here is just hanging in the wind. There is no other stud over here. If you look on the F-Spec and the Pro controllers, there is another stud right there. You complete the battery plus bus. Battery minus bus is a little bit stronger, and then you've also got this stud right here. So battery plus across here is completely floating in the wind, so the transients here are really high, really, really high. And these caps can't deal with it. As a result, they arc from their shells to here, even through this thin layer of Kapton tape. They arc anyway, and then things just massively run away after that. This is the root cause failure right here. And we've got caps that show this same evidence. So I'm just going to grab a couple of them. Yeah, those three will do. Doesn't really matter which ones I pick. They're all thrashed. They're all thoroughly thrashed. But this one right here, that one is like wowzers. That one's really bad. Okay, so this cap right here, it's got a giant hole missing out of the side of it. The arcing right there literally evaporated the aluminum can. The whole bottom of this thing is ragged with little bits of aluminum from the massive amount of electrical arcing that happened to it. Yeah, you can see that that can was seeing some serious heat. This one right here, yeah, same thing. You can see it was seeing massive heating. This whole side of the bottom of the can is completely evaporated away, missing. In fact, it's just a bunch of little jaggy edges. There is this little spot right there where the aluminum is completely gone. And again, obviously that capacitor saw some serious heat. And the same thing is true for all these other ones. This one here, not only is it partly missing at the bottom, but it actually has a hole arced away on the side of it too. So I'm guessing that the can became one current path and the elements inside became the other current path and just literally vaporized the aluminum. This cap right here, wow, this one is really impressive. So this is a giant slag of melted copper, or aluminum rather. Here's another blob of melted aluminum. Here is another blob of melted aluminum. And when I hold it like this, you've got a little bit of the lip left, of the crimp on the thing right there. And otherwise, all the rest of this is just completely arced away. That only happens from electrical arcing, period. So let me show you a good electrolytic capacitor, because we got a whole bunch of them right here. Yeah, you can kind of see it on the macro video. There we go. You can see it. See that little line right there? There is another one that's vertical usually. Yeah, I'm not seeing it on this one. This might just be across this way. Yeah, I can see that one on several of them. But anyway, you put a light score in the top of the capacitor so that when gases build up, if the capacitors get hot, this will definitely happen, electrolytic capacitors, the gases want to expand outwards, right? Like, they do with anything. And so they put this little score in there so that the top of the cap can bulge upwards, crack open its aluminum, and the gases can vent out gently. So like here's a little 12-volt power supply, and you can see all the electrolytic capacitors, they have all these score marks on the top of them. That's for that exact same reason. That way, if they do get hot, the gases expand upwards, they split the top, and then it just vents gently, and the capacitors don't explode as a result. All right, so if you were to take an electrolytic capacitor and you were to connect it backwards, the thermal runaway inside the capacitor happens so fast that the vent doesn't have a chance to crack open, and they literally explode like a firecracker. So if that's what happened in this controller, we would not see whole capacitors. And these are whole. I mean, they've got massive arcing on them, but the capacitors themselves are all there. They're all still inside their cans. If we saw a massive thermal runaway situation inside the capacitors, or the vents didn't work, they would explode like a firecracker. You'd have little bits of paper everywhere. The foil layers inside would just be little shrapnel metal bits everywhere. And we don't have any of that. We have whole capacitors. The only way you get this result is from electrical arcing. In which case, everything that I said about this Kapton tape being a flat-out requirement is, in fact, dead true. And it's still not adequate. And the reason why is because this battery plus bus over here is incomplete. And so these guys here, they just act like this massive back EMF surge battery for all intents and purposes, and then things go catastrophically wrong, and they start arcing to these traces, and then, all that plasma arcing happening, and things just go from bad to worse. And here we have two logic boards from two Rush controllers, both with the exact same failures, one with the Kapton and one without. So what I said before about the solder mask being enough isn't in fact true, not with this really horrifically bad design. You would still need more, and you still need to tie this battery plus bus down so that this shit show doesn't happen anyway. So yeah, what I said about just putting solder mask on there and you wouldn't need the Kapton tape, yeah, in this horrifically bad design, that wouldn't cut it. I mean, the Kapton tape didn't cut it. It wasn't enough to stop this problem. All right, so anyway, yeah. Oh, I'm not done with that. Okay, so we will talk about this stuff in the next video. I'm still doing logic board stuff. All right, so the other thing I want to talk about is in my Rush controller, I went on a good while about how massively repaired it was and how pissed off I am about that. And here I've got another logic board that is also massively repaired. So let's look at one that hasn't been, and that's this one. This has not been repaired at all. You can see the light shining across everything. You don't see any little blobs of flux. When we put this on under the micro lens, the same thing. You're not going to see variations in the type of solder used. You're not going to see little bits of flux anywhere. This is a minty fresh, other than the giant blackened crater in it, logic board that came from the manufacturers that KO Moto uses. And so this came through their manufacturing process, got washed and put into a controller for the first time, and went to the person that this controller went to. It, of course, died catastrophically, like they're going to do, and then it went to me. So never seen repairs ever. And the backside shows you the same thing. So you can see on this connector, there's no flux all around it. It was properly washed. You don't see anything across all these capacitors. Everything was properly washed after assembly. So brand spanking new logic board, like how they should be, like Christopher claims that all of them are from KO Moto, and yet he's lying through his teeth. You've already seen the teardown of my Rush controller, and it is obviously massively repaired. And here is another Rush logic board with massive repair all over it. Okay, so if you notice on this one here, let's just look around that chip. Notice how it's nice and clean. There's no black anything. This hasn't had any solvent on it. Only thing I've washed this with is with dish detergent and a toothbrush and a ultrasonic cleaner. That's it. And this board was in that same bath with this board. So how is it that I have such dramatic differences? This one's got black shit all over everything. Well, there's one reason why. A, no solvent, so I can't wash away the flux, just soapy water. So you can see that one is nice and clean and shiny. And this one here is covered with crap. And the reason why is because all that soot adheres to the solder flux like nobody's tomorrow. And without solvent, it won't wash away. You can see it all around the CPU. You can see it all over here. You can see it around all these gate drivers, that quad op-amp package. You can see it around all the diodes. You can see it around this chip here. See it around those protection diodes, around this little I/O chip. See it around all those gate drivers. Why? Because all of that stuff got replaced when this board blew up, and they did massive repairs on it, and they never washed the board and left all the flux there, just like they did on my Rush controller. Here is a second logic board from KO Moto with massive repairs on it. And all the crap stuck to the flux. All right, let's look at the backside, because, the same evidence as you see on my Rush controller is here. So here's the backside. So you can see all up there. See all the flux around the connector? That's called rework. Somebody resoldered all this stuff and left all the flux in there. I did not use solvent on here. Just soapy water to wash the soot away to see all of the flux underneath there. That is a repair job right there. And again, you can see all the crap around all the capacitors, all the flux on there. This is a repaired logic board, period. Can't see about where the smoking crater is, because that part's kind of gonzers, but bet you anything, all of that stuff got reworked as well. So here you go, folks. 2 out of 2 Rush controllers that I've taken apart both have repaired logic boards. 2 out of 2. Sorry, guys, that's called 100%. Obviously, they're not all that way because, the black controller has this nice clean logic board in it. Clearly, they do make new logic boards. But they also repair and sell as new repaired hardware. So, do not like KO Moto. This is shitty. This is really mean. It's bad. Definitely despise KO Moto for pulling this kind of bullshit. This is not acceptable ever. All right, guys. Yep, there will be macro videos on this stuff too. I think that's everything I want to show about the logic boards. And now I'm going to talk about power stages in my next video.